The Nikon F3, Nikon's first pro-level camera with an electronic shutter, was in production from 1980 through 2001. The Nikon F3 was the first professional-level Nikon SLR to incorporate an electronic shutter and automatic exposure capability. Of course, the F3 provides the same high-quality materials, refined fit and finish, and durability for professional use as all F-series cameras. Like its predecessors, the F3 was part of a remarkably broad and advanced professional camera system. When used in the new aperture priority mode, shutter speed range is a stepless 8 seconds to 1/2000th of a second. An F3 HP is an F3 body with a so-called high eye point DE-3 prism. Compared with the original F3 standard DE-2 eye level finder, the F3 HP has a larger viewfinder eyepiece. Actually, most of the F3s that I have seen incorporate the HP viewfinder. Of course, the F3 HP viewfinder provides a 100% frame coverage, like all F-series cameras, and a large, bright image with 0.8 times magnification. Nikon offered 21 interchangeable focusing screens for the F3, but for general photography, the standard K screen with split image, microprism collar, and matte field is satisfactory. Back in the day, I waited years to upgrade to the F3 HP because I liked my F2 AS so much. However, since I, like many, have been using a Nikon FE as my second body, together with an F2 AS, I eventually succumbed to the desire to have aperture priority auto exposure metering on my main camera body as well. The F3 HP, particularly without the optional MD-4 motor drive attachment, has a perfect shape, body size, and weight for comfortable and stable holding, as well as all-day carrying. The F3's built-in hand grip allows a firm grasp. One advantage of the F3 over the F2 and earlier F is that the exposure meter is incorporated into the camera body instead of the prism. As a result, you can now change viewfinders and still keep the exposure meter. The F3 HP's easy-to-view high eye point DE-3 prism is perfect for most purposes, but for various specialized professional applications, Nikon offered other types, such as the DW-3 waist level finder, the DA-2 action finder, and the DW-4 6-time magnification finder. Nikon even produced the DX-1 AF finder with an electronic focusing aid indication. The exposure meter on-off switch is a plastic lever that is incorporated around the shutter release button. This is something of a precursor to a similar switch on the future F4 and other newer Nikon camera bodies. However, I find the switch on the F3 quite tight and hard to turn. In fact, my original switch got damaged from long use and became stuck in the off position. I had to get the switch replaced at my local repair shop. Fortunately, there is no reason why the switch could not just be left in the on position during periods when the camera is in frequent use. Even with the switch in the on position, the meter circuit does not actually activate unless the film wind crank is pulled slightly away from the body and the shutter release button is pushed partway down. The shutter and meter are locked off when the film advance lever is pressed into the lock position. The F3 is the first F-level camera to utilize a standard ISO shutter release thread in the center of the shutter release button, instead of the older AR-2 style connector. The shutter release button is positioned just right, in the middle of the body, and has a silky smooth feel. As indicated already, the F3 is the first F-series camera body to support aperture priority automatic exposure instead of just manual exposure adjustment. Simply turn the shutter speed dial to A to enter this mode, then adjust the aperture ring appropriately. A really cool feature of the F3 is the 80% center-weighted exposure meter concentrated within the viewfinder's 12mm outer reference circle area. The 80% central weighting is a great compromise between Nikon's standard 60-40 weighting and a spot meter. The 80% weight allows you to easily meter on the most important section of the image, while still incorporating some exposure information from the remainder of the frame. You can center the 80% central spot on the metering target, then hold down the exposure memory lock button on the front of the camera body to reframe. However, since I personally find it uncomfortable to use the exposure lock button in this position, I usually use manual exposure mode in these cases, unless I am in a rush to shoot. The F3 viewfinder includes at the top of the frame an ADR readout of the aperture setting on all Nikon F mount lenses that have an aperture ring. Basically, any pre-G lens will work on the F3. To the left is an LCD display of the automatically or manually selected shutter speed in full stop increments. One thing that I don't like about the F3's manual exposure mode is the compact style manual exposure indicator display in the viewfinder. When in manual exposure mode, correct exposure is shown by small plus and minus indicators to the left of the shutter speed display. You can adjust the exposure until both the plus and the minus indicators are visible at the same time. This system, while extremely accurate, is not as clear or quick as the match needle setup in the Nikon EL, FE, FE2, or FM3A, or the 3-diode minus 0 plus setup on the F2AS, FM, or FM2N system. The F3's viewfinder display is illuminated by ambient light. However, you can push a small button on the prism to electronically illuminate the display in the dark. The F3 is the last F-series body to have manual film wind, unless you attach the optional MD-4 motor drive, with up to 6 frames per second performance. Starting from the F4, the F-series evolved to built-in automatic film advance. This is great if you need to often shoot rapidly. However, if you just want a high-end film camera for slower, more deliberative shooting, manual film advance provides quieter film operation, much better battery life, and a smaller and lighter package compared with the auto advance F4, F5, and F6. Unlike the semi-pro bodies like the F3 and FM, the film advance lever on the F3 may be operated in one complete stroke or a series of shorter strokes. The F3 can be used without a battery in an emergency. Just push the mechanical shutter release lever on the front of the camera, although the mechanical shutter speed is limited to only 1/60th of a second. This is certainly a far cry from the full range of shutter speeds, but it's at least flexible enough for many situations if needed. Nevertheless, lack of power is almost never going to become an issue. My F3 HP battery and shutter have never died throughout decades of use, and a single battery seems to last forever with the camera's low power utilization. The meter coupling lever on the F3 can be locked up to allow mounting of prehistoric non-AI lenses, although most users probably converted their non-AI lenses to AI decades ago. As a pro-level camera, the F3 has a proper mirror lockup feature for certain specialized lenses and for slow exposure times. Of course, multiple exposures on a single frame are also supported. Since the camera has an electronic shutter, it also has an electronic self-timer, complete with a flashing red light, just like modern SLRs. The eyepiece has the usual shutter lever, but still no adjustable diopter. This is no problem, however, since Nikon still makes screw-in diopter lenses for the F3. Actually, the F3 HP works fine with diopter lenses for the F90X, F100, etc. These diopter lenses have screw-in rings that are slightly thinner than the harder-to-find ones that are actually designed for the F3. The large f3 HP viewfinder eyepiece is relatively easy to use with glasses. On the f3 without the HP prism, use diopters that are designed for the FM, FE series of cameras. In order to use an electronic flash unit, just like the earlier generation F and F2 bodies, the F3 still requires that an accessory shoe be mounted over the rewind knob, or that a special Nikon F3 flash unit be mounted directly onto the camera in the same position. Of course, you could also use a side bracket flash with a sync terminal cable. Interestingly, the maximum flash synchronization speed is 1/80th of a second, slightly slower than the 1/90th of a second maximum synchronization speed on the Nikon F2. The new advance is that the F3 offers TTL through the lens automatic flash exposure, although the F3 can't simultaneously meter ambient light. The powerful F3 era Nikon SB-16A speedlight is a perfect match for the camera. Newer Nikon flash units can also provide TTL flash functionality with the F3 when used with the special adapter AS-17, which also allows convenient flash exposure compensation. If you don't have the AS-17, you can do balanced fill flash the old-fashioned way as follows. First, set the background exposure manually with the shutter speed at or below the maximum electronic flash synchronization speed. Then set the appropriate camera distance based on the film ISO, selected aperture, and guide number. Finally, fill flash is achieved by further shutting down the aperture by 1 to 2 stops, and correspondingly adjusting the shutter speed. You can also set the SB-16A to TTL and adjust the flash exposure down by 1 to 2 stops using the exposure compensation dial. The compensation dial does not adjust the background exposure in this case because both shutter speed and aperture are set manually. All that being said, for fill flash, it would frankly be easier and faster to use a more modern body such as the F90X, the F100, F5, or F6, which all provide various forms of 3D matrix balanced fill flash, Nikon's most advanced flash system. The F4 also has pretty good flash capability, but it is still early generation pre-D technology, i.e. there's no communication of subject distance from D-type lenses. The basic Nikon F3 and F3 HP were available in black. The Nikon F3 was also available in a few special variants, all of which had the high eye point viewfinder, such as the Nikon F3T with a titanium exterior, the Nikon F3 Press, and various limited edition models. The F3T was produced in both champagne and black colors. As a pro-level camera, the F3 offers the benefits of aperture priority auto exposure, basic TTL flash, and a more compact and elegant design than the prior generation F and F2 bodies. Compared with its later descendants, the F3 does not provide such benefits as matrix multi-segment metering, automatic balanced fill flash, multiple exposure modes, and built-in automatic film advance. On the other hand, the core F3 is significantly smaller and lighter than those later pro-level bodies. And when used properly, the F3's exposure metering system can be just as effective, or even more so, compared with the early generation matrix metering systems in some later Nikon cameras. For deliberative photographers who still like to shoot film, the F3 and F3 HP provide a highly refined and relatively compact manual focus platform for the extensive universe of pre-G type Nikon f-mount lenses.